Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the morning meeting. If you're here on the East Coast, it's 9 o'clock, some other time in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you for joining. Dan, Sean, and I will walk you through the day with peace, love, and understanding. And then we'll take your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your electronic hand. We'll call on many of you. Won't get to everybody. We always like new people, and we want progressives. If you voted for Bernie Sanders anytime in your life, or Ben & Jerry's is your favorite brand of ice cream, please raise your hand and join us in the conversation. We welcome all voices here. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. We believe in peace, love, and understanding. Someone recently who'd never watched the program read the chat, and they said, this thing's a bunch of crock. Your program's just as polluted as everything else. No, that's the chat. We bear no responsibility for that. Please, though, try to refrain from writing crapola in the chat. All right, guys, good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to talk about Matt Gaetz, so cool your jets. We'll get to him in a moment. President Biden today. Two events. He signs the Congenital Heart Futures Reauthorization Act of 2024 in the Oval Office at noon, and then he welcomes the Boston Celtics to the White House. By 4:30 today, unless something changes on his schedule, he will have said more in public about the Boston Celtics than he will about the current conditions of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Some people are wondering, where is our president at this time? His spokesperson, however, will brief at 1:30. Not everyone will have high expectations for that, but it will be watched closely in the absence of the president. Speaking of absence, the Democrats' recent nominee for president of the United States, Kamala Harris, is not anywhere to be found to speak out on issues of the day or about the campaign. She remains in Hawaii with no public events. Donald Trump, also has no public events, but my spidey sense is tingling. And we're going to talk about this. I think we may see him today. Just a wild guess, but wait for more on that. J.D. Vance, second day on Capitol Hill, holding meetings with another controversial nominee, member of our controversial five, Pete Hegseth, the nominee to be Secretary of Defense. Even more details coming out regarding very serious allegations against him regarding an alleged sexual assault overnight. We'll talk about that as well. There's news in Ukraine. There's news regarding Benjamin Netanyahu. Also, we'll talk about that if you all wish. Otherwise, relatively quiet up on Capitol Hill. All right. Matt Gaetz, we always like to be forward-looking, but I want to show you a little video. This was Matt Gaetz yesterday after a series of courtesy calls, although they were all held in the Strom Thurmond room. I think so the Secret Service didn't have to sweep every Senate office. But here's Matt Gaetz leaving the Capitol yesterday.
Meeting's been today, sir.
What can we ask? What your
They've been going great. Senator's been giving me a lot of good advice. I'm looking forward to a hearing. Folks have been very supportive. They've been saying we're going to get a fair process. So it's a great day of momentum for the Trump-Vance administration.
Are you confident you can get confirmed by the Senate? Do you feel like
it was a great day?
It was indeed a great day. So I continue to believe that if they're not going to just withdraw him before a hearing, the senators will give him a hearing, because that's sort of fair to say the president wants to have a hearing. Let him have the hearing. The hearing could be a complete circus and maybe derail him, but maybe not. Sean, our daily temperature take. Where are you on the Gaetz nomination?
I'm same where I was yesterday. In fact, I mean, you saw that answer yesterday. He's doing the right things meeting. Say what you will about Matt. And again, everyone understands the goal here is to give you an analysis, not to defend but just to explain the process. I think he's going into these meetings with the right mindset. I want to hear what you have to say. I want your advice. It's smart how he's approaching this stuff. He's kind of trying to play the humble role, not something that he's done the last several years. But I think that he understands the process. You don't go in guns a-blazing. You treat these senators want to be sucked up to. They want to be told, tell me what's on your mind. What could I do to earn your vote? You want to be deferential to them. And I think Matt, again, say what you will, he understands the process very, very well. There are some lines out there that he's trying to give them some comfort that he's not going to go in full guns a-blazing and that he understands the mission at hand, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that he may not win everyone over, but he's playing this well.
Yep. Dan.
Survive and advance, as Jim Valvano said. Just every day that a senator does not come out and publicly say they're not going to vote for him is a good day. And I think every day that goes by and there's no new charges, it'll lower the temperature a little bit. He's being deferential. I thought even that statement, like Matt Gaetz is known to pop off and he didn't attack Democrats. He didn't kind of try to create a boogeyman. And I think JD Vance being up there too is also very helpful. I mean, he is going to be the sitting vice president. Everyone knows JD Vance is close to the MAGA influencer world. So survive and advance.
We don't know who will be on the Senate Judiciary Committee yet, right? Because they haven't done the assignments for the new committee. But the reality is, I don't think even the most ardent ones, even Susan Collins, I don't think will come out against him in advance of the hearing. And as we've all said, if he gets the hearing, you never know what's going to happen. There were new revelations yesterday, leaks. Again, I think this whole thing about whether the report will be released is a red herring. I think between leaks, the Justice Department investigation, and what the Senate committee does itself, I think the facts will be known. There is this question of whether the women who are his main accusers on the personal issues will be called to testify. They don't seem to want to. And so that's a big variable. If his accusers don't testify, and it's simply he said, she said, she said, she said, the members may give him the benefit of the doubt. Sean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that you've seen the lawyer out there doing the rounds. So I have a feeling that I don't know that the women testify in an open hearing. They may meet with the senators privately, or the lawyer may do something like that. Again, I mean, this goes back to Kavanaugh. I mean, if you can go out there and say, when was this? What was the deal? And if it's a lot of gray or ambiguous stuff, it's going to make it harder. To your point, unless they come out and make a specific allegation of wrongdoing, I have a hard time thinking that senators are going to be able to say, well, I heard a rumor, I read something bad about you.
Well, and I also think, and I want to be fair because we're talking about the politics of this. To my knowledge, no one has accused him of sexual assault. No one has said these girls were underage. The question is, did he give them cash or benefits for their friendship, let's say? Whereas Hegseth, the allegation is assault, that it was now he says it's consensual. She is saying it is not. To me, that is a different, story. And if Hegseth's nomination gets wobbly, I actually think it benefits Gaetz, because now you're like, is the right really going to take out multiple nominees of Donald Trump? If they get one scalp, will they feel like they sent a message to Trump? We'll only go so far. And I think that may actually end up helping Matt Gaetz.
Well, okay, but let's be clear about the Gaetz allegation. There is an allegation regarding someone who is allegedly 17.
Okay.
It's also the case that the allegations are that as a congressman, he attended parties with drugs and paid teenagers for sex. Okay. Illegal, but also should the Attorney General of the United States have done that if he did it as a congressman? I'm just saying, if they don't testify themselves and the members are inclined to say, we just don't know if it's true, I'll be curious to see what he says about the Venmo payments, assuming that's an accurate document. What he said in the past is generosity to girlfriends. Yeah. Well,
look, I want to be clear too. I think the Democrats are going to go after them and should.
I think the obvious question, which I've never seen him address, is, okay, you say they were girlfriends. Like, what was your relationship with them besides you paid them money and you had sex with them and maybe attended drug parties? Sean?
Yeah, again, I think the details are really going to matter on this. I mean, if the answer is you're a single man that had multiple girlfriends and you bought them gifts, I mean, look, if that's the threshold on Capitol Hill, we're going to have a lot of special elections.
But he sent them cash, it appears, not bought them gifts.
No. But I mean, he's saying what I'm saying is he's saying I reimbursed them for something, I bought him a gift, or and those were the payments. So unless you can show, to Dan's point, I mean, there's icky, and there's improper, and there's creepy, and then there's illegal, and there's a line. Right. And so if the answer is, I don't like your lifestyle, I think that's going to be very different than you did something illegal.
Yeah, I agree. Facts will matter. All right. Pete Hegseth has already started his meetings, and he's already gotten one Republican senator to all but endorse him. John Barrasso met with him this morning already and put out a very, very supportive statement. Didn't say he'd vote for him for sure, but said he looked forward to the whole process, and very, very praising. Again, new details on this 22-page police report released yesterday. It's another he said, she said. It does not appear as of now that two things are in line to happen. One is it does not appear that the accuser is particularly interested in testifying. And number two, I've not seen any pressure to release the non-disclosure agreement. So I ask again, Dan, you first this time. Well, do you think it matters if one or both of those things happen regarding his chances of surviving those allegations?
Yes, I think the Democrats will push for that non-disclosure, for him to release the non-disclosure. He may say no, but I think anytime you get the nominee on defense saying, I don't want like the facts to come out, like I am blocking it, I think it looks really bad. And they'll smell a little bit of blood on that. So I think, and I've said this here for a while, if I were the Democrats, he is the one I would try to go in on.
One thing we haven't seen, Sean, just real quick, we haven't seen yet any talk of the minority staff reaching out to the accusers, right, and trying to manage their participation in some way, and that's something to watch for. Sean.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, and I know this is like a weasel word kind of thing, but non-disclosures work two ways. And he can say, hey, unfortunately, it's not a question of whether I want to release it. There's another party in privy to this. So I can't. So, I mean, and I know that that's a weasel, but it buys you the time. And this gets back to what you're saying, Mark, which is they have to, like, at some point you have to produce the body, if you will. Isn't that the legal term? It's, like you have to basically say, show me who this person is. And I think, he admits, according to his lawyer, to being intoxicated. And so there's a question again, were you just drunk and stupid, or did you cross the line and it'd be inappropriate? And so we're going to need to see some testimony on this. But I think the bigger question, by the way, is there more to any of these things? It's like, if this is the only shoe to drop, can you contain this? But a lot of times you see multiple shoes start to drop, and then that's when the cascading effect occurs. And so the question is, are we dealing with one or two situations that we know now, or is this sort of the crack in the dam and the water's about to flow down?
Yeah. And just to say, as we button this up and move to the Treasury sweepstakes, both of them have criticized Republican senators, something normally is not welcome in the nomination process. And both of them have far less management and applicable experience to do the jobs than your typical nominee. In MAGA world, they also have positives. But I'm just saying, we shouldn't just assume that every Republican senator is only going to weigh their nomination on that one question of, are the allegations against them true or not?
I talked to one person this morning that said to me, with respect to Hegseth, that they're keeping an eye on Joni Ernst. That they really believe that Ernst, one, doesn't like how she's been treated by Trump world personally. Okay, whatever. But secondly, that her stance on women in combat, sexual assault in the military is not going to be a circle that she can square. And so sorry, but those are, just to be clear, I know you meant this, but just to put it in sharp relief, those are two separate issues of intense importance to her.
Yep.
Women in combat and sexual. You elided them just a little bit in the way you said it. I want to make it clear. She's got a personal history with both those issues that she feels very strongly about.
Yeah. And for that reason, that number, because I think we know that Collins and Murkowski, I mean, I think if you're doing the math on their end, you're kind of assuming, okay, we can't count on them. McConnell, I have a hard time thinking, I mean, who knows on which ones he fights, which ones he wants to fight on. But then you add a Joni Ernst, and it also gives a lot of other Republicans cover. When Joni Ernst, a combat veteran who has a personal history as this, as you mentioned, says, I'm opposed to this, it gives a lot of cover to other members to say, look, if my colleague Joni Ernst says this, I got to weigh that now.
Yeah. Politico this morning, Jonathan Martin has a piece with a broader list of possible no votes on various nominees than we talked about yesterday. And I think all the names on his list that we didn't say are actually pretty good. So I'd take a look at that. And I'll say, as I think Dan and I agree now, Hegseth is still more likely to go down than Gaetz. Treasury, I've mixed reporting. I think it's going to pop today. I think it's either going to be Bessent or Warsh. I don't know which it's going to be. My sources are mixed on it. Sean or Dan, anything on Treasury you'd like to say?
Nothing changed from yesterday. I still think if I had to put most of the money down, I'd put it on Warsh for Treasury. But
Yeah.
as I told people, there's two things that matter in this process more than anything: proximity and timing. So proximity to Trump when he's making a decision, and then the ultimate timing when that decision gets made. So you can have proximity for 8 hours in the day, be talking to him, boom, 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 boom. I want Halperin, I want Halperin, I want Halperin. You go to the bathroom and someone else walks in and says, you know who'd be a great choice? Dan Turrentine. And he goes, all right, let's put it out. So
Put it out. I think they
proximity
all
and timing both matter.
I think they both met with him yesterday. I've read that. I've not confirmed that. Rowan met with him yesterday. I believe Rowan's out. I believe it's just Warsh and Bessett. I believe.
I will say I find it interesting that they keep going, and then you get the story in the Wall Street Journal today that the Federal Reserve is starting to think they may not be able to keep cutting interest rates because of some of the stuff and some of the appointments being made. I get that economic team in there and out pretty fast.
Yeah, and look, they're very focused, I think, on Warsh replacing becoming Fed chair. So if he becomes Treasury Secretary, I think it'll just be until he becomes Fed chair. All right, Karl Rove, Mar-a-Lago's favorite political analyst. Sean, I thought you would smile at that. No. Karl Rove made a really good point in his column this morning. You normally see president-elects have like a public events where they announce the nominees, the nominees say a few words. All this has been done on paper. We haven't seen a single one. So, Sean, here are my theories. One is he's doing them so quickly that logistically there's no time for people to fly in. Two, there's clearly some notion that he's supposed to lay low. This is like the lowest he's laid for a long time. Three, they're doing them so fast, like not just quickly day to day, but they're just trying to get him out the door. That they want to have all the people out, so they're just as soon as they're done, they're done. Why is this happening? Why isn't he doing events? Carl's point is you do events, you say this is a great person, here's their agenda, this is what I believe in, you drive message. It's more about these confirmation controversies. So what do you know? What do you think? Yeah,
I just don't think he cares anymore. I think he knows his people. He wants to get it over. He's not doing a lot of public things. I mean, he has not been, before it was in 2016, keeping up with him all day was a whole task in itself. I don't think this time I want to pick my people. I want to keep going, and he wants to just go.
But why is he being so low profile during the transition?
I think that's a great question because it's not just with the nominees. He's not out there doing the normal stuff that he loves to do. Yeah. I mean, I talked to a couple folks about he's actually, well, I will just say this. He's not looking for the attention that he would normally get on a lot of things. Although I will tell you, when I was at the America First dinner, what was it, last 2 Thursdays ago, he called the camera. He was the one who called the cameras in. That was supposed to be a closed press dinner, and he called the pool in. Yeah,
and that's the exception. That's really like the only thing he's done. And he's not been super active on social media, a little bit. But it's an interesting question. Dan, are you feeling the absence of Donald Trump from your life?
I mean, I think the sun revolves around him, and I think he's very happy. He won decisively. It's all about him, and all these people are serving him. So I think there's no question. No one's upstaging him. And I think the second thing is, look, there were long stretches of the campaign in the last year where he laid pretty low and was not in the public very, he'd call into Fox and Friends from Bedminster or Mar-a-Lago, but he was not very present on the campaign trail. He was not nearly as active with activities. So, if you're a Democrat, this is something that you talked about that never really, was talked about very much because of Joe Biden. But there's a history here this last year.
Yeah, I go ahead, Mark.
All right, so we'll switch to the Democrats, and then we're going to go to your question. So again, if you'd like
before we do switch, before we do that, one thing that I think is worth flagging, because I mean, obviously the goal of this, I'm somewhat surprised, maybe not, that it didn't get the attention it deserved on at least some of the morning shows, whatever. This DOGE effort by Elon and Vivek, great op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. I think it's worthy because it's not like I think they sat there and hammered this thing out together in the tea room at Mar-a-Lago. But at the end of the day, it really is instructive. I was actually really impressed with how what they describe as their approach to this. And I think if handled correctly, that's the key word, the asterisk, the whatever, this could actually be very, very effective. Because it shows that they've really thought this thing out, not just the goal. Everybody, I'm going to cut / government spending, but they understand the challenges that they will face and the pushback that they'll get. and they've laid out a very constructive understanding of the problem that exists and how they intend to address it. And again, I don't know that I mean, I'm sure our staff are largely helped like that, but
Yeah.
it really said to me, okay, these guys aren't like crazy, just saying we're going to go in and slash and we're going to cut this. They've thought it through, and
I agree.
we'll see where this goes. But I've been so far impressed with this effort, because I do believe that the one issue that did not get properly addressed on the campaign trail by either party was the threat that we face from our debt and deficit, and
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a serious thing. But obviously the question is, they take on entitlements or not. If they don't take on entitlements, it's interesting, it's symbolic, it's at the edges. But they've got
I will say this, just for the record.
And the Defense Department. Those are your
three
big.
I think they will.
big
I think
things.
they will. I think they will take on the Defense Department.
They will. I mean, it's the idea that a major department that wants massive amounts of additional money can't pass an audit is somewhat laughable.
Yeah.
I will say this.
Newt Gingrich used to say he's a hawk, but a cheap hawk. And I think that's what they'll be.
Right. And that's the thing, is that there's just so much business that is not done well. I will say this as a former budget committee spokesman, just so that we get ready for this, because part of our job, I think, has always been to explain the process. Just get ahead of this. When in the way it works in Washington, if you have $10 and you expect 20 and I give you 15, that's a $5 cut. And I think that what we're going to see going forward is discussions of massive cuts and whatever. And just brace yourself, because
restraint in growth.
Right.
Restraint in growth.
It's never actually a real cut. And I think that when you look even at entitlements and you say we can actually slow the rate of growth or find these efficiencies, everyone freaks out and calls it a cut. It's not.
The only thing is Donald Trump has no history of embracing cuts like this. He likes to give everything to everyone to make them happy.
Except he's a lame duck.
No. But I will tell you, Mark, I watched Mulvaney walk into the Oval, and granted it was 8 years ago, and all he had to do, like if he said, I want to have a social tonight, the idea that it might even be, the words were going to be Social Security, he'd say, stop, Mick, I don't want to hear it. He does not want to touch entitlements.
I agree that he's never wanted to, but he's a lame duck, and it's the only way to really make deficit reduction. And the reality is, we all know exactly how to deal. The Medicare and Medicaid's tougher. We all know how to change Social Security so it doesn't affect current retirees or those approaching retirement. We all know what the changes are. We all know that a lot of reasonable people in both parties support them. So he could do it. He doesn't face the voters again.
But here's how.
But he'd have to go out combine that. Yeah, he'd have to go set. He would have to put his capital and
Elon. They'll let Elon sell it.
No, they won't, because they don't have any power. But the members of Congress don't fear Elon, and they don't fear Vivek. They fear Donald Trump. Now, so Trump would have to lean in and explain the benefits of. That's not his style. He wants to win and win the night, and that's it.
He's not running for election. He just says, I'm going to be the one who saves the program.
So he's going to think about the headline in 5 years, thanking him.
It's all demagoguery. It's all demagoguery. The elites will love it. The elites all want it.
Here's the reality, though. Trump is going to. I mean, we're missing the point here. Trump's going to go out and say, cups were costing $15. I'm now getting cups down to $12. I'm saving the American money. And so he's not going to touch entitlements. He will take credit for reducing the debt and the deficit, and without ever touching entitlements.
If you don't touch entitlements, you're not really reducing the deficit.
I know that, we know, but there's a difference between saying you've done it and doing it, and that's what we've got to start.
I'm not saying it's
100%.
I'm not saying it's 100%. I'm just saying it's possible. All right, we got to move to the Democrats, even though there's an Elon Musk tweet.
Come on,
desperate to read. All right. So Dan Balz, the Washington Post, had a story which I thought got very little play. If you're interested in understanding the Harris High Command's perspective on why they lost, either subscribe to the Washington Post or get behind the paywall. Dan interviewed Jen O'Malley Dillon and unnamed others. Most of it was on background. Jen went on the record for a few things, but they run through a bunch of stuff. One thing they say is they didn't think they could win the Sun Belt states, which of course they didn't tell the truth about during the campaign. They said exactly what we said here repeatedly, which is they had to only win the blue wall states and Omaha in exactly 270. But if you read the story, there's no blame put on the nominee. They basically say, we did great. There's nothing we could have done because we only had 100 days and the wrong track was so high. The trans ad didn't do any damage. It's just people didn't think the economy was good. I find it to not be a particularly forthcoming analysis, primarily for two things. And I'm going to play a soundbite and then go to you guys. One is they don't blame her, and I continue to think the mistake was that she ran. Not that anybody else necessarily would have done better, but she was so tied to all the things. They say we had 100 days to separate from Joe Biden and to deal with our record. No one else would have had to do that. Any other nominee wouldn't have had to separate the way she would. And number two, they don't deal with the fact that the party's too far left to win an election. Here is last night from Two-Way Tonight from Dan and my series, D-Future, Congressman Richie Torres saying his primary analysis of what went wrong.
The Democratic Party is a ideologically varied, unwieldy coalition ranging from the Squad to the Blue Dogs. And so there's no universally agreed upon diagnosis of what went wrong, and therefore there's no agreed upon prescription of how to move forward. But I hope that there's a pendulum swing back to the center. I think we as a party have to recognize the majority of the American people are in the center. When the Republicans swung the pendulum too far to the right on abortion, the Republicans paid a price. In the 2022 congressional midterms, their red wave was reduced to nothing more than a trickle.
So again, one other tidbit from our discussion with Congressman Torres, I asked him who he wanted for DNC chair. He said, I don't have a candidate. And then he said, Rahm would be pretty good. I should have followed up and asked him if Rahm was called him. That was a mistake. Dan, what do you think of the Ball's interview with the Harris High Command?
There's two things that I am sympathetic to, and there's three macro things I'm not. I am sympathetic that it was a short time frame. I mean, everyone would agree you would never want to run for president in such a short, compressed period coming after Joe Biden.
I got to interrupt you that one just to say it was. But when she said she was going to run and she boxed everybody out, I think she knew when the election was.
Well, and look, I totally think it was a winnable race. I'm just saying.
Right. Okay. Fine. Sorry. I won't interrupt anymore. Go ahead. Short time.
No, that's okay. And then two, I do agree with them that Trump was innovative in reaching new voters by, with influencers and podcasters. So those two things, I give them credit for.
I don't give them any credit for that because she could have done it too.
That was not. Hold on. I said I'm trying to have two things that I agree with Dan Ball's in the assessment on. The three things that I totally disagree on is if the economic and immigration headwinds were so strong, why didn't you attack them like Bill Clinton focused like a laser beam? Like the fact that the story says that they thought going to the border once in late September was going to move the immigration numbers is comical. I mean, for an entire year, we heard Joe Biden's administration threaten an executive order, but to always back off because either the lawyers didn't approve it or the advocates went, ballistic that you can't do this. The second thing is everyone knew the economy was what was an issue, and you offer three of the most small ball, vanilla, like poll-tested, simplistic things. They argued that voters wanted change and there was nothing that she could do about it. She led on that issue for a period as the candidate of change, and then she played, prevent defense and lost that slim advantage that she had earned, at one point. And as you say, like we've asked this before, why they didn't do a more aggressive action on immigration, on the economy, and this idea that there was a hangover from COVID, like the party knew this, and yet it didn't want to do anything. And to me, what's not in this story, and whether it's her or anyone else, is the party is largely intellectually exhausted. I mean, Obama ran in 2012 on kind of a tactical, grinded out, like I'm going to protect the ACA from being overturned. Biden ran because he thought Trump was like a threat to democracy in Charlottesville. I still don't know why he and then she really want to be president. Like, what did they want to do for you? It was just like, he sucked. So to me, as you say, that story, I laughed at it. If that's what they're going to try to hang their hat on, like we had no chance and there was just a tsunami that overwhelmed us, I don't believe it. I totally think this was a winnable race, and they didn't do it.
Yeah. Dan, as Pink would say, you're effing perfect. Sean.
So I think that the story was fascinating on two fronts, and I think you've encapsulated both of them. But I think it was one, they didn't, and I get why you can't. I mean, like, just to be fair to Jen O'Malley Dillon and the others, you just ran this campaign, you're not trying to be disloyal and crap on your candidate. So in fairness to them, having been there before, you got to be a little careful about like, hey, she sucks. Like you can't do that as an operative. It's not loyal.
But sorry to interrupt. Why do the interview then?
Oh, no, because you know that Dan's going to write it and get other people to crap on you. So you're just figuring out where you want the crap to flow from. You're basically saying, does I want other people to crap on me, or do I want to get him to it so we can do it now? And this goes to my second point. I think that Dan, I mean, if you read the story, he helps them. I mean, he's like, however, he's in the camp of, I'm going to help you make excuses. What I thought was funny is there's a million things in there about what she could have done. The reality is she also got a leg up. She didn't go through a primary. She didn't have to defend her positions from 2019. She didn't have to cater to the left to outflank other candidates, right? So she got a lot of advantages as well. She raised over $1 billion. So look, their spending was atrocious. They had to pay influencers to support them. The spending that has come out now and how much they're in debt, I get it, but they're pretending like somehow they were running this on a shoestring with 5 days. They had a bad candidate that failed to address key issues. They made horrible media decisions. The response to basic questions was pathetic. I mean, it was so devoid of reality.
Well,
and I think
yeah, and it also misses the point that all of her problems were Biden. Biden had the same mechanical problems. For a year and a half. I mean, there's a reason Barack Obama went to see him in April of 23 to say, you need to get your head out of your ass and get moving because they have a primary, you don't, and you need to start building the infrastructure and take advantage of the fact that you don't have a primary. He went back to him in January of 2024 with an even more forceful, what are you doing? So like Jen O'Malley Dillon was there in 23. The party was like, why aren't you guys taking advantage of the fact that he is like trying to outflank Ron DeSantis? He's bragging, you're letting him off the mat to rebuild his image to be seen as moderate while he's trying to protect his right flank. And it wasn't until the State of the Union in March that they were like, okay, we're going to start the campaign now, everybody. But Trump took the lead in November of 23 and never gave it up.
So I think two other things that jumped out at me. One is with all this money and the infrastructure that they inherited from Biden, I've said this before, mechanics matter, logistics matter. Where was this vaulted ground game that our side sucked at that they were so brilliant at? Like, Mark, you pointed out, like they're suddenly now we're like, yeah, we're going to get crushed in Arizona. Well, that wasn't exactly what they were selling us. So I think the data and the get out the vote effort on their side is definitely something after 2 cycles, 16 and 24. I think there should be some real skepticism about the claims from the left about how great they are. But Dan, I want to the thing that blows my mind, I've told about my example on the economy and on inflation, where she somehow blamed it all on price gouging, which didn't pass the smell test. This issue about separating yourself from Biden, it's not tough. I now that the election's over, I can feel a little freer. But I was like, this isn't a tough question. I love Joe Biden. I think he's done a great job, but obviously he's president. There's only one president at a time. I'm from a younger generation. I've got some different priorities and some way of thinking. I've worked with President Biden, but I'm going to go off in these. Here are my 4 priorities that are different. It's not hard. Anyone can do this, like a 4-year-old. And the idea that she was just like, I'm not going to criticize him because no vice president does it. No one asked you to criticize him. Come out with your priorities. It's not a tough question. And she couldn't pass the basics.
Well, and I thought the answer she had at the last week was perfect. When he came in, his number one job was getting us out of the COVID pandemic. My number one job is dealing with, it could have been prices, immigration, and chaos. Like, I think the average voter is like, oh, okay.
But no offense to you guys, but the people working in Wilmington were just as smart as you. And they told her to do it. They told her all I'm saying is, this is why the failure to criticize her. I'm not for gratuitous criticism of her, but we all know the truth. If she could have gone on Rogan and survived 3 hours, they would have put her on Rogan. Like, the problem is she couldn't do it because, as I said before, she cannot make difficult decisions under pressure. And that's what running for president and being president is. And people are just talking around the problem. There are other problems. The party's too far left, etc. But to have a whole interview and a whole story on what went wrong and to talk about how it wasn't winnable as opposed to our candidate couldn't do it. I understand why they won't do it, but that's a
but
fantasy
this is-
land conversation.
And
It's
you
a
know when I
fantasy
think
land
we're going to hear
conversation.
that?
when we
I suspect that Kamala Harris, part of this vacation, like one, she's been writing thank you notes and trying to clean up the loose ends of the campaign, which is what you do. The second is I think she's seriously trying to figure out, do I want to try to potentially do this and position myself to be a voice? No. and so why I say this is if you're thinking of running in 28, you're going to poach some of that staff. Right there were really good people on that campaign. They have experience.
Well, and you want all the donors to be for you and all the DNC members to be for you.
So when you pull in that staff and they're now on, let's say, Team Spicer or Team Halperin, the arrows will come out from her potential opponents who will plant stories that it was her. And that's when I think you'll see the knives go in early in the new year to prevent her from trying to get back in.
The last thing I'll say on this is this. Look, we talked about this. Biden's staff, when he was struggling, like he just needs to go out and do a town hall. He can't do it. You cannot force somebody.
It's the same.
And when somebody said to Kamala, you should go out and do more interviews, you don't think that Jen O'Malley Dillon said, yeah, we know this. She can't do it. I mean, it's like, Sean, all you need to do is dunk the ball and you'll score. I can't do it. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I know. All right. Go to your questions. Harris supporters, please raise your hands. I just see a lot of, being honest, see a lot of Trump folks. We want lots of different voices. So if you're a Harris voter, please raise your hand and get in the conversation. Warren, welcome in. Unmute yourself, please. Tell us who you voted for, where you are, and what's on your mind after you unmute.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I live in the Dominican Republic. I vote in Florida. I went into the voting booth thinking I was going to vote for Harris, but I just couldn't get there. I wrote in Marco Rubio, basically, for president. So I'm calling about an issue that probably, I think, is one of the big failings of the Biden administration. It's not being talked about. It has to do with Haiti. I used to live there. I speak the languages. I'm also, by the way, a former Reagan administration appointee, so I've done that. But right now, more than half the Haitian population is in a state of acute food insecurity. 1.6 million emergency situation, and people are dying of starvation, particularly in the western part of the country. And the Biden administration has not acted forcefully to restore order there and bring humanitarian relief in. I think it's an enormous humanitarian tragedy. And also, I would think it's one of the reasons I couldn't pull for Harris. But it's also, I think, an opportunity for the incoming administration to take strong action on this. And it may not be characteristic of President Trump, given what he said about Haitians, but it's both a humanitarian and an immigration issue longer term. So I would just
Warren, you're right. And as you know, this is not the first administration that's fallen short there, but it has gotten particularly acute on their watch. And I think there's no great explanation for it. I'm sure the desk officer would say they've done all they could, or perhaps not. But the failures, it's on their watch, but it is, as you know, it's one of the toughest countries in the world to try to straighten out.
Well, I think our development strategy has just been wrong because it doesn't take into account the unique and chaotic place that it is. But that can also be fixed. And by the way, I'm in touch with Rubio's staff, and I've been an advisor to him in the past, and I'm going to put together something for him on that. Yeah. Anyway,
great. Warren, thank you for raising it. Really important issue, and it is a human tragedy. All right, Bob, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Hey, it's great to see you. Great platform. Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah, yes, sir. We hear you fine. Tell folks where you are, you supported for president. What's on your mind, please?
Yeah, so I'm in suburbs of Detroit. I guess I'll say we got folks around the house, so I won't tell you who I voted for just because guys are working on the home and just
all good.
I try to stay neutral, but in that sense, but I'm a healthcare lawyer. I'm interested in the Oz nomination, and more broadly thinking of, and I think some of the discussion came up today, how you pare down the federal budget and find opportunities for savings. CMS covers about a quarter of the federal budget. A lot of it You know, I don't know how much fat there is there. I guess is the easiest way for me to put it. There are a lot of essential services. I think there are opportunities for innovation, for longer term savings, but there's also a lot of things you just can't cut out. If somebody needs a surgery to save their life, they need a surgery to save their life, for example. But I'm interested in knowing, do you all have any clue about, I guess, the incoming administration's thinking on ways to save within that quarter of the budget? And I suppose, is there any clue you all have from Oz? And I guess I wasn't paying attention to his Pennsylvania campaign, if he had anything to say about it. And then in terms of confirmation, I'm thinking they're just me reading tea leaves. There are 4 physician senators. And my thinking is, if Senator Cassidy, who's probably the most moderate of the group, is an advocate for either Oz or Kennedy, they'll get confirmed. And if he's an opponent, they won't. So open it up. But thank you for having me on. I really love the platform.
Thank you. Great question. So Oz really wanted the job. There were other things, that, as I understand it, that he was up for, and he really wanted it. As you said, it's a massive part of the budget. You know, there's 2 ways to look at Dr. Oz. His detractors would say he's a TV doctor. He's been accused of fraud. He's been a peddler of phony products. And then there are those who are fans of Dr. Oz who say he's an innovator. He's an outsider. He understands things from the consumer side. He's a great communicator. Obviously, we have to see who's the head of OMB, who's the head of HHS. If say again, well, probably Russ, and who's a big cutter. Yeah, probably. We have to see what Kennedy's posture is towards those issues. The Republican Party in general, as you know, hasn't really, and Donald Trump, saying he's got a plan to have a plan during the campaign, they haven't really made it clear exactly how they want to approach this. And again, if they want to look for savings, as you suggested, that means restraints in growth and real cuts in services. I think that if you want to be optimistic, you can say that there is a Republican healthcare agenda that involves more competition, more consumer information, some of which is in the Affordable Care Act, but there are things that can be more market oriented. And there's also, I think, an inclination to rely on the governors, which I'm a big supporter of, right? Every state is going to have its own sense of what kind of healthcare plan it wants, what kind of policies it wants to make available, et cetera. So my guess is that this is going to be more of an OMB and Treasury or NEC like macro decision, and then Dr. Oz is going to be more of an implementer of that and a seller of that. But there's no doubt that Republicans get accused of wanting to destroy the programs. Democrats don't do anything to shore them up. Again, there's some things in the Affordable Care Act that shores them up, but they're not on, neither program's on a sustainable path. So I don't think anybody can tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I do think you're going to see whether it's through Ramaswamy and Musk, or through OMB, or through whoever the economic quarterback is. I do think you're going to see an effort to have a package of healthcare reforms that deal with efficiency and savings, but they claim won't have much to do with cuts. Sean.
Yeah, so the only exception I would take to everything you just said is that there's a lot of things that don't involve cuts to services where you can find efficiencies, duplicities, that don't involve cuts to services. The way we deliver healthcare is it's just an absolute disaster. What we do and how we address. First of all, the subject that you're bringing up is fantastic. How we address healthcare is something that I've really taken an interest in, and literally will ask my own doctor, why is this not covered? Why is this covered? Why do we prescribe this and not that? And how do we handle long-term care? Senior care elder care is going to become a massive issue in this country. So how we're addressing Medicare, Medicaid is a huge thing. And to your broader point, if you want to actually find real savings, especially in the healthcare area, guess where they all are? CMS, right? So I think if Russ Vought is back at OMB, that's a positive sign for getting things under control, but they are on unsustainable paths, number one. Number two, the delivery of our healthcare system, particularly for seniors and others, is just horrible. And so it is ripe for that. And I think that, to Mark's point, Dr. Oz wanted the position. He has a close personal relationship with both President and Mrs. Trump. And so I think that helped him. But it was funny because I had heard a lot about, and there's a lot of intrigue, put it that way, in the deputy slot at HHS. And it's fascinating who's willing to take it and who's not, because you're having a lot of faces, and guess who's going to do the work? The number two. And I think you have a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm not going to get left with doing all of this and implementing what you guys went out on TV or said in a cabinet meeting. But you're right. It's a fascinating subject, a fascinating dynamic that's going to happen. And if you were an entrepreneur, like a really enterprising reporter that wanted to know where the action's going to be, I would, obviously DOD, DOJ is going to be huge, the IC, but also I think that keeping an eye specifically on CMS would be huge.
Yeah. Bob, I should know what Oz's healthcare plan was as a Senate candidate, and I confess I don't know, but it's worth looking back
It's
up.
all right. I don't either, and I'm out here.
Yeah.
Well, but I would say this, by the way, just the one mistake that I think people are like, you're buying into the Trump transition is very clear about what's happening now. I don't care what you believe. This is what we're doing. Are you willing to do it? Like, this is not like 2016 where it's like, tell us what you'll do with the department. It's, you understand this is what we're doing. This is when we're doing it, how we're doing it. Are you ready to drive? Full stop.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
but
I'll
I'm just
tell you what,
curious.
too, if they can improve service, because no one wants to defend the healthcare companies, insurance, like to Sean's point, it is ripe for innovation. If I had to say the two biggest liabilities Republicans still have, it's abortion and healthcare. If they could try to eat into that healthcare deficit by not just, trying to cut the hell out of stuff, but actually trying to improve efficiencies and deliveries of both service and products, it would be I'd be very curious to see if Democrats would get on board a little bit with that.
And I'll just say, and I think we all recognize this, is that Republicans are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in that they want to, and I want to find ways for savings in the budget. In healthcare, that's a quarter of the federal budget goes through CMS, and to find savings in there almost requires long-term healthier lifestyle and societal changes and demographic changes that are beyond anyone's control, because it's only going to get worse. Other than that, you can make cuts, but it's politically toxic, and you could raise revenues, which can impact growth and has its whole other set of issues. And so I think Republicans don't talk about it because there's not a real good answer without increasing taxes. And I don't know that anybody wants that.
Yeah. Bob, thank you. Really thoughtful.
Yeah,
Grateful
thanks,
for you for
guys.
joining.
Yeah,
Thanks for
great
coming in.
question.
Appreciate it. Come back regularly. All right. Speaking of TV doctors.
Hey, John.
Hey,
John, welcome back. First, well, get soon. First, was there any fallout from your recent appearance on Two-Way?
Well, Mark, you're very careful about not looking at the chat and the comments. And my wife did that for me after you posted things across socials. And so I did.
So she saw people referring to you as Dr. McDreamy and stuff like that?
No, she only found the negative ones. Trust me. Literally only that.
All right.
But some of them were warranted. So I hope to address some of them. But,
all right. Well, thanks for coming back. We loved having you on. We got a great reaction to what you said, and we'd love to know what you think of Dr. Oz and what else is on your mind.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. So the podcast data for the year came out yesterday, at least Apple Podcasts. 7 of the top 10 podcast episodes last year were about health. The number one overall was Casey and Callie Means on Tucker. Okay. So that was, I think I have shared that personally with more people than I can count. That is actually how I found you, Mark, was then listening to Tucker, which was like, I'm listening to Tucker Carlson. I felt like I was going to get smitten by God, but that's how I found Two-Way in the end too. So I think this goes back to also what Congressman Torres was saying yesterday about how he characterized the RFK vote. And so I wanted to say just briefly, like the RFK vote, this is RFK's platform. When he announced his campaign was the Democratic Party has left me. I want to go back to the JFK RFK party of anti-war, pro-free speech, and a focus on chronic disease, because it is a crisis in this country, right? That is his platform that he ran on. That's what drew me to him. When I assess the situation, I see the regulatory capture by industry as being the number one issue in this country. And so for the Democratic Party to reject RFK in that message, regardless of the personal views on him, someone put in the chat the New York Times fact check of RFK recently this past week about the Fruit Loops.
Fruit Loops.
So just take that and then multiply that by 1 million, and that effectively boils down the media and elite response to RFK.
Doc, I think just so everyone understands this, they did a fact check on RFK, and they said he has falsely claimed that Fruit Loops are different in Canada. For example, and then they said, for example, Fruit Loops in Canada, their Fruity Pebble stuff is derived from carrots and blueberries. Where in the United States, it's derived from red dye 5, blue dye 4, yellow dye 6. And so therefore, and it was like, wait a second, you just proved what he said was right. It was a mind-blowing statement that they made.
Truly,
Yes.
it was so egregious that I thought it was fake. I had to go and see if it was real. I really did. And it was. And it fits with the narrative around RFK throughout his entire campaign, honestly. And so that's the big thing. COVID is the other one. RFK coming out and saying what he did about the COVID response. And we could do a whole hour-long show on just like, you can't handle the truth about COVID, but it is like, as Meghan McCain said, a huge, huge, huge issue, the refusal of the follow the science crowd to follow the science. The ends have to justify the means if you're going to have a conversation about, do the ends justify the means? And in the end, we did not do better during COVID than pretty much any other developed country. We did worse. Sweden didn't put masks on their kids. They didn't lock down. Sweden did not close everything down. We then had to have inflation due to printing money because we shut everything down. The ends were horrible. And we didn't get to see our grandparents when they were dying. We didn't get to see kids when they were being born. Like it was
and
bad.
that doesn't even include the view of some that the vaccines have really hurt kids.
Correct. And then so you have RFK coming out and saying, hey, look at the company's own data about specifically, say, young, healthy men getting the vaccine and the risk of myocarditis being higher than the risk of COVID for that population. For young kids, similar. And so people are like, wait a second, the elites, to Congressman Torres's point, the Harvard trained, don't listen to me because I went to Harvard. Listen to me in spite of the fact that I went to Harvard. The Ivy League has become a ticket to buy your way into this club that makes you feel like you have some sense of false moral superiority that's not based on a search for veritas, for truth. And so there's so many people now that truth is democratized, that anyone can try to find it. It's not in these little ivory towers anymore that you have to try to go and get. And it used to be like that's where you actually got the best education. Now it's just a ticket into a club that makes you feel better than somebody else. And I did have a good experience. I was the first person in my family to ever go to Harvard. Like I get why people do it, but it does not offer anything. And if anything, it hurts now because 98% of the faculty are on one side of the political aisle. That's not an education. That's not trying to find truth. That's trying to be an arm of a party. And that is just a failure. So I agreed with Congressman Torres there. I disagreed with him on the Harris moving to the center, or the party moving to the center. In my circle of friends, the number one indictment of the Harris campaign was her embrace of the Cheneys. Her full-fledged open arm embrace of the Cheneys was the most bizarre thing. This $1.5 billion Veep episode of a campaign that they ran, like where they put out their little thing about, I had to go make sure it was real. She put up here's what I'm going to do for Black men. Here's what I'm going to do for Latino men. And I thought it was fake. Like, that's how bad that was, how pandering and identity politics driven, and the country just was not and is not there. And so I'd love to do an hour-long talk on what's the truth about COVID alone, and then what is the truth about our healthcare situation in this country. And just, you can go listen to Marty Makary, who's now proposed to be the head of FDA. Go listen to there's Jay Bhattacharya. Go listen to Casey and Callie Means on any platform that they're on. That is why people are drawn to RFK, because they just want serious conversations. They're done with
Can I ask you a
this like
question?
divide and conquer, win the next election. Like, let's just actually do something that's good for people. Yes, sorry, Sean.
You know, one of the things that has come up on a lot of these podcasts, and you're the perfect person to ask on this. How much time do doctors get in training when it comes to actual nutrition?
I can only speak for myself, but I know a lot of people. I got zero. I got nothing on functional medicine. You know, you can listen to Callie Means talk about this, and going back to the Flexner report and how the medical education system in this country was set up by John Rockefeller's personal attorney to be a vehicle for giving pharmaceuticals to people effectively. And that is what it is, just the same way that our software is not a patient care software. It's not a physician-centered software. It's a billing software. You know, the biggest one is Epic. It's a billing software. Physicians are so frustrated. Patients are rightfully furious that they spend 10 minutes talking to someone who has to spend more time getting the billing documentation right than about actually spending time with their patient. And I got radicalized on this because I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist. I was seeing so many patients in pain that were not being cared for and being told your pain isn't real. That I went and got trained in acupuncture, which to me would have sounded crazy to myself 10 years ago. And then I started seeing patients, and just spending an hour listening to somebody was healing in and of itself. Like, that's how bad our healthcare system is, that just spending an hour letting somebody be and talk and feel seen and cared for and heard is in itself therapeutic. Like, that's where we're starting out and trying to rebuild this. And RFK, to me, again, anti-war, pro-free speech, let's do something about the chronic disease explosion in a country where we spend twice as much money as anywhere else for worse outcomes. What are we doing? Can we be serious for 5 seconds of the conversation and not just think about winning the next election? So that's that. The other question I had for Mark was, you alluded to it, but like, you rightfully said that Biden's decline in mental acuity and the cover-up of it was, I think you said, the greatest political scandal in American history at one point on Tucker. Right now, what is going on with this decision regarding Ukraine and Britain? And like, from what I can tell, I'm a doctor, like, this doesn't seem to be a winnable war at this point. So like, what are they doing? Like, I don't have any insight. You have insight.
Well,
What is going on?
I'll tell you, and we're up against the end here, but I'll give you that's okay. I'll give you my business. We love having you on, and we want to talk to you about the two shows you proposed. So we're going to reach out to you and talk to you about helping be involved with those and help us plan them, because we love having you on. I don't think anybody really knows outside the administration. I'll tell you what I believe is happening. Their assumption is that Donald Trump is going to make a deal, as he said he would, pretty soon, right? Like immediately after he takes office. And they're trying to not have it be on terms favorable to Putin. So they're trying to do things to change both the psychology and, as much as possible in the intervening weeks, the facts on the ground to strengthen Zelensky's hand. The problem with getting a deal for the last several years, as I sardonically always joke, is Zelensky will make a peace deal except under two circumstances. He won't make a deal when the war is going poorly, because they don't want to make a deal on adverse terms. And he won't make a deal when the war is going well for him, because he's taking land, and he doesn't want to make a deal when he can take more land. That's been the problem. Zelensky doesn't really want a deal. He wants to just keep going. And I think the administration's assuming that the worst about a deal that would be pro-Putin. And again, they're trying to make it as favorable to Zelensky and the Ukrainians as possible by making these last minute moves that they hope will change both the psychology and the facts on the ground. That's my guess. It's a very worrisome situation. And as we said at the top of this program, to have him do all this without speaking out is scary. But I think he's not speaking out because he doesn't give a darn anymore, because he's got no accountability, because he's a lame duck. And also because they don't want him to make a mistake, because I don't know what the state of his acuity is. Maybe we'll learn at the Celtics event today, but it doesn't seem particularly good. Doctor, thank you again. We're going to reach out. Very grateful to you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Unmute yourself again. Unmute yourself. You got to unmute yourself. Sorry, I muted you. Go ahead.
Dan, you're everything that I wanted the Pod Save America boys to be. And so I thank you for your voice and your objectivity in all of this.
What about his smile?
Thank you.
His smile is his smile and his running are just cherries on the top. And Sean, I didn't get to meet you last time,
Getting hot
but
in here.
I love the New England in you. I'm a Massachusetts boy, so I love that you can't get rid of it. And I just
Wicked huge.
it's
Oh yeah,
just-
Sean was off the last time you were here. That's right.
he was. And
Yeah.
Mark,
Mark,
Oh yeah,
I'll just
but no, actually, if you recall, Mark, I was on my plane, American,
Yeah.
and I was watching it live, and literally so frustrated that I couldn't be here because I thought you did such a phenomenal job that I was watching and in our sort of production group chat, telling everyone how phenomenal you were doing, and disappointed that I couldn't be there.
I'm glad to meet you.
Well,
Mark, you're the gold
thanks for coming.
standard of this, and there's no bronze or silver right now. So thank you very much.
Very, very kind. We love having you on. And again, we're going to reach out and talk to you about doing the shows you suggested. Thank you. Have a great day. All right. Tonight I'll be on at 6. We're still figuring out what we're going to do tonight, but we'll be here for a regular show. Tomorrow, the 3 of us will be back, except one of us is off, and there'll be a guest host, but I'm not going to tell you who. But 2 of the 3 of us will be here at the regular time. And then tomorrow night, when we have 2 great pollsters, Celinda Lake and Ed Goaz with their new poll, 5 p.m. Eastern time, special time, because one of us is getting on a plane tomorrow night. So 5 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. So don't come at 6, come at 5. I'll remind you and through various means between now and then. Thank you for watching, gentlemen. Treasury Secretary, I thought it was going to happen by now, but I think it'll happen before we meet again.
Hey, real quick, I know I don't want to relive this, but I will say I was so glad that such a smart doctor commented the way he did. Just let that sink in for a second, that a doctor as brilliant as he is didn't take one course or wasn't given one course in actual nutrition. That's what we're dealing with in our healthcare system right now. And I think it's just, it explains a lot. And so what President Trump is doing and RFK and others, you may not agree with everything, but to tackle the basics of our healthcare system is so needed.
I hope they really do it. It'll be awesome if they do. Dan, you've got a 32-inch waist, so you eat well.
I do. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you at 6 o'clock tonight.